Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of TNM Inviews. Today we'll be talking to David Crowell, composer David Crowell, about his newest composition, Cloud Forest, which will be premiering on the TNM Music Festival by the Argus Quartet on Sunday, April 10th. And we are just so excited to have him here and to speak to him about the newest composition and just about his life in general. So, David, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
No worries. Thank you. So I guess the first question, how we usually start is, what is your musical journey? And are you actually still active with your band, Empyrean Atlas? And what are you all up to these days?
Yeah, my journey basically started when I was about 10. Started playing saxophone and uh, almost right away started improvising and getting into jazz and everything. And eventually, after high school, went to Eastman School of Music in Rochester and did a saxophone degree there. And kind of at a certain point while I was there, I started to get really interested in composition, and also started hearing a lot of contemporary classical composition that I found really interesting. And so I started really while I was there, the last couple of years, um, checking out some of the great ensembles that are still there and that originated there, like Larmal Sound and Jack Quartet is also from Eastman. Um, and so it was this really amazing hotbed of contemporary music. So yeah, started kind of getting into that. Then I came to New York and yeah, spent a couple years kind of migrating around trying to figure out what I was doing there. And then I started I started playing with Philip Glass in 2007, and also around the same time started um, writing for finally writing for contemporary ensembles. I had my own group that I was working with called the David Crowell Ensemble, and a few other groups where I was writing music kind of sort of half composed, half improvised music. So writing for improvisers, and which is something I still love to do. But I was really interested in the challenge of starting to write through composed music and coming up with everything myself, basically. And yeah, so that kind of set me on the journey that I'm still on to a large degree. I'm still obviously really interested in composing for contemporary classical groups. I play saxophone, as I mentioned, and so I'm still interested in writing music for improvisers. And I like to try to keep both streams going at the same time. They kind of feed off each other in an interesting way for me. So yeah, that pretty much brings us up to today, I think.
And
Yeah.
you do have your band though, right? As
Oh, I'm
well.
sorry. The band, yes.
That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah. So Empyrean Atlas, yeah, I started that. I guess about 2013 or so, and we have 3 albums, and it's I would say it's in a little bit of a hibernation at the moment, which was not helped by the pandemic and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's there. Hopefully, I can um, get it fired up soon. Would be great to play. But that was a very specific kind of music that I wanted to explore, and a very specific set of influences. And um, so and it was sort of outside the worlds of what I was doing of writing music for improvisers, writing music for contemporary groups. It was sort of a third stream, and so I found some musicians that I thought would be willing to kind of take the journey of finding some new sort of a new style, I guess, a new way of composing. So, but yeah, it's still around, and it will be active at some point soon.
I only asked because your style has like this such a like this minimalist improvisatory feel. And I mean, I guess quite not similar to Philip Glass, but in that vein, right? Which makes sense considering you played with his ensemble. Um, and I guess you kind of answered this, but how would you describe your sound then? Like, I guess in a word, or a
Ooh.
feeling.
Um, yeah, like I don't. I think that I I understand the minimalist thing. I don't really consider myself a minimalist, just like a classic minimalist, like Glass or Reich or those types of composers. But yeah, there is that kind of it's something I draw from, as sort of a component of certain pieces. Yeah, I guess I would say that my music sort of shifts through some styles, and uh, the surfaces of it kind of changes, but at the heart of it always is basically counterpoint. I just love counterpoint. So no matter what kind of music I'm writing, I'm always attracted to um, some kind of counterpoint, which could vary stylistically depending on what I'm doing, from Imperial Atlas style, sort of three guitar counterpoint, which has some specific influences, like Reich is definitely one. Um, South African guitar music, like especially from Zimbabwe, and also great jazz saxophonist composer Steve Coleman. So those are kind of like the three things that are going into that kind of thing. And yeah, I just wrote a piece for A Far Cry, which is a string orchestra in Boston, and that was very influenced by Renaissance vocal music, which is also very contrapuntal and pretty different stylistically from Imperial Atlas. But well, you asked for one word, so I would say counterpoint. No, that was more than a word, but that's
No,
basically
I
the
love that.
yeah
That's great counterpoint.
yeah
Yeah, because it is like it's the first thing we learn, right? But it's still so um there's just so much you could do with it.
yeah. It's endlessly fascinating, at least for me,
Absolutely.
and I think for probably a lot of people. There's something special about it because it's both perceptible and sort of non perceptible. Like you can hear some of it, but you usually can't hear all of it all the time happening at once, and so your ear is kind of migrates between all these different lines of music that are happening, and
Right.
yeah, I just love it.
Incredible. That's awesome. So, kind of going off of that, sort of. Yeah. So, on Sunday, April 10th, the Argus String Quartet will be performing the world premiere of your newest piece, Cloud Forest. What inspired this piece? Why Argus? And what can the audience expect to hear? Not giving away too much.
Right. Um, well, why Argus is because I heard them perform a couple of years ago at Merkin Hall, and I loved them. I thought they were so amazing. And I had worked with the cellist, the former cellist and founding member Joe Wang, and on a project, previous project. So I talked to her and kind of got the ball rolling. But essentially, it was just because I think they're really good, really amazing ensemble. And yeah, I think in terms of inspiration, I think that there's also a little bit of, especially in the first section of the piece, a little bit of that Renaissance kind of style. It doesn't sound like Renaissance music, but it is coming from that place of Renaissance vocal music. Um, but I think, yeah, this is one of those pieces where I just wrote music sort of for the purest form of it. Like I didn't have kind of an extra musical concept in mind or anything like I sometimes will. So it's really just about the joy of writing. And I was really interested in trying to make something that felt very comfortable, specifically for string players to perform, just very, very pneumatic. And I guess, once I was done, I a lot, sometimes when I'm writing in this way where I don't really have a particular extra musical concept, I'll finish it. I'll just listen to it a lot and sort of try to think about what it reminds me of. And in this particular case, it reminded me of this cloud forest that I visited in Hawaii, and particularly the first section, which has these harmonics at the beginning and that gradually descend through the range and all the instruments. And the whole movement is kind of that process of the metaphor is the clouds sort of descending into the forest, and this kind of really mysterious energy which sort of slowly reveals itself. And so that's kind of a good chunk of the piece comes from that idea. And then the second part of the piece is very energetic and sort of after you're sort of inside this mysterious world, you also realize that there's so much happening, so much life all around you, even though it feels still in a sense. But you start hearing all the birds, and so it's very nature. So it's kind of this natural experience that I had there, which was really unique and interesting, and I'm sure it made an impact on me, and who knows, maybe it was directly responsible for this piece. So at least that's what it reminds me of. So
Amazing. We're so excited to hear it. We're
Me
so
too.
excited to hear
Yeah,
your music. Yeah.
thank you. I can't wait.
Yeah, that's going to be great.
Yeah.
The cloud forest, that'll definitely be in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
That vision.
Sure. Yeah. I hope it brings people in, some kind of visual image. Yeah.
For sure. So I guess you kind of alluded to it, your writing process. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Like, how do you get your ideas? Do you think them? Do you play them? Do you dream them? What does your writing process look like?
I think it's pretty varied. I suspect this is the same for a lot of composers, but yeah, I mean, recently I've been writing a little more on saxophone than I usually do. A lot of times I try to avoid MIDI as much as I possibly can, but occasionally I use that, or at least selectively for certain sections. Sometimes I play at the piano with some nicer samples than MIDI sometimes is. But I think at the core of it is that I do improvise a lot, at least to find initial ideas. So like a lot of the counterpoint that I come up with has its origin in improvising, like finding an initial melodic line that I like, looping it, finding parts that go with that, developing it from there. So it starts out without any music a lot of times, and then as it develops, then at some point I'll write it down and sort of continue developing from paper. But I was thinking of this piece I wrote a few years ago, a guitar piece, which is for 6 guitars, and I played the whole thing because I play guitar too, and it was really fun and sort of an organic way of working. But unfortunately, at some point I did have to write it down, and so I spent about I don't know, like at least a week, just like 8 hours a day, pretty much, just sitting there transcribing like everything that I did rhythmically, and just, I mean, it was so. But yeah, it usually starts from some kind of place because I do love to improvise, and a lot of the ideas come from there for sure.
That's funny that you said, like, in the beginning, you were like, it's varied. Yeah. Every composer we've asked has said that, but they all kind of come to the conclusion that, and they all kind of improvise. That's interesting too. I think that's the way.
Yeah. I think it's sort of, especially if you're comfortable with it, it's when you're, if you can get in the right mindset, it's when you're sort of most free and open. And even if ultimately you don't use the idea, or you only use half of it, you can sort of take the feeling from it and then sort of refine it over time. Right. But the initial spark of it is coming from that place for sure, which is a little hard to mimic if you're like on Sibelius, using MIDI sounds, which
Yeah,
is
that's uninspiring in a lot of ways.
so very uninspiring. Yeah, yeah. Some occasionally it's necessary, but yeah, I do try to avoid that.
Yeah. So I guess I actually have another question. So what is, I guess saxophone would be your favorite instrument to write for? Would that be fair to say? Or
Not
do you
to
have
write.
like a favorite ensemble or instrument to write for?
I mean, I love saxophone. I don't actually write for a lot of saxophone in a contemporary classical context, simply because there aren't actually that many um, players out there. I mean, there are a few really great ones, but um, it's not a typical part of an ensemble usually. Uh, but yeah, as far as I sort of go through phases, like the Cloud Forest and the string orchestra piece I mentioned. There are also a few other pieces that I wrote for various string ensembles. So I got really into that for about 2 years. I kind of did mostly working with strings. I love writing for percussion, and actually one of the things I have coming up is a new percussion quartet that's premiering the day after Cloud Forest. And I think I like that because the my music is so rhythmic, and I find that the percussionists and me, we get along. You know, we have a we're sympathetic to each other's ideas, and um, so yeah, that's a favorite ensemble. Yeah, I mean, I've written for many instruments, but I'm obviously guitar. I sort of didn't mention that, but I write for guitar all the time and love it, doing that. So yeah, I'd say guitar, percussion, and strings as of the last couple of years.
That's awesome. No, that I percussion is a I feel like percussion is not a new one, but I feel like that's something that that's an interesting one to choose because most yeah,
Well,
I like that a lot.
percussionists are generally really open to new music because the repertoire is not as vast as for a cellist or violinist.
Right.
So there's a sense of like, well, there is for many string players as well, but a sense of discovery, and like we're creating repertoire because I mean there's a lot of percussion pieces at this point, but just in terms of historically, it you know there just isn't as much repertoire. So as a result,
Yeah, of
um,
course.
they're very interested in collaborating and stuff. So
Of course.
that's I like the spirit of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
like that. I like the spirit of it. Now, we always ask this
Yep.
because we want to know kind of what do you like outside of music, but this could also be musical. So, what are you excited about, musical or otherwise, that like right now in your life?
Um, well, non-musical, I would say I I feel pretty surrounded by music at the moment. So I'm not thinking too non-musically, to be totally honest, but um, nature is something that I love. I spent high school in Alaska and Northern California. I lived in when I was a kid, so I'm hoping to do a little more hiking than I have been. Um, I am going to go to a residency this summer in the woods, and I'm very excited about that. Um, and and there's a lake with a boat, so that's also great. Um, yeah, I that's kind of where I'm at. Music and nature. So that's it's been that way for a while and seems to continue to be. So
Those are two great things. And
yeah,
okay, you
yeah.
said you're surrounded by music. So musically, what are you excited about?
Um, I have a lot of music that's getting played in the next couple of weeks, so I'm just very excited, including Cloud Forest and the percussion quartet I mentioned, Sandbox Percussion, who are up for a Grammy. They're amazing. I've been working with them for almost 10 years in some form, which is kind of wild, but they're playing a new percussion quartet in DC the night after the Tribeca concert, and A Far Cry, which I mentioned, is the week before in DC, and a few other things. Also, um, yeah, some pieces I'm working on coming up, and yeah, and playing a lot of saxophone. I'm playing on this really cool concert for Bang on a Can's Long Play Festival, which is reimagining The Shape of Jazz to Come by Ornette Coleman, who's one of my favorites. And I think I was remembering that he that record was one of the first three records I ever heard, the first three jazz records I ever heard. And so I've been living with that record for about 30 years, which is crazy. And I'm really excited to participate in that event. I think it's going to be really cool and interesting. So, yeah, that's kind of the music stuff. Yeah,
No,
good
that's
to say.
great.
Yeah.
Thank you. And we'll have links to all of that as well because we want to support you and make sure everyone knows what's going on.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, of course. So the last question I have for you, uh, what are you listening to these days, and who are your favorite artists, and like what's on your most listened to playlist right now?
Um, I got a record player, and so it's kind of an interesting experience because I don't have a ton of records, but I really listen to the ones that I do, and I find that this kind of um, is a nice antidote to the everything available digital world that we live in. I was remembering when when I was in school at Eastman, just like putting aside 2 hours to just sit on my couch and listen to music, which is something I mean, I don't always have time for quite that much, but it's really nice to put on a record and listen to it a lot, and really sort of get a sense rather than just kind of floating on the surface of it a bit. So with all that said, I have been listening to Palestrina, some motets and madrigals. I have been listening to a lot of Miles Davis, actually. I'm having a Miles Davis renaissance. Uh, his fusion stuff in particular, but like some of his late 60s quintet stuff, which is some of the most sublime jazz music that there is. And oh, Terry Riley, I really have been into lately. His record Rainbow and Curved Air is kind of his famous one. Um, yeah, it's kind of a lot of older stuff. I'm I mean, I'm constantly going to concerts, so I'm hearing so much music that way also. So it's kind of between the concerts and the records. That's sort of my what I'm listening to at the moment, I guess.
Cool. What was your last concert you went to?
Oh boy, what was it? I went to hear Julia Wolf's piece for multiple flutes. I think there's 12 maybe. But like flute, alto flute, bass flute, piccolo. That was
Right.
really cool. That was at the National Flute Society or something. It was
That
interesting.
an appropriate place for that then.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah. It was a whole concert of music for multiple flutes. So I
Incredible.
really I love the flute. So I really got my fill of the flute that day. But
Good.
yeah, that piece is really beautiful. It's there's a really great video of it online that people might want to check out. It's called Oxygen. So yeah, a lot of recent stuff. Of course, now it all runs together, but I think that was like actually the last one I went
Okay.
to. So
That's a cool. That sounds
yeah,
awesome. We're definitely gonna have a link to that because that's a fun.
yeah, the video is really great. I think people will enjoy that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Great. Oh my gosh. Well, David, thank you so much for speaking with me today and for
yeah.
speaking
Well,
with us.
thank you for having me. I can't wait for the concert in a few weeks. So
We're
yeah,
very excited.
yeah, me
And
too.
all that info will be on the website and everything. So, be sure to check there and come come on down and hear the
Yeah,
music.
come on down. Yeah, it's a good program. Some other great composers. So I think people
For sure.
will really enjoy it.
For sure. Oh, well, thank you so much, David, and
Yeah,
we'll be seeing
thank
you
you,
soon.
Alex. All right, I'll see you soon.
Bye.
Okay.